unauthorized to fire at will.
Yep, that's the one. All right. All right. Thank you. Just have your camera facing you. Thank you, sir. All right. Thanks, Gary. Hey, guys. Thanks. Last minute technical issues, and I'm trying to fix it over the phone as I'm starting the show, and Gary called, so he's on his way in. Tech stuff. Oh, but yeah. Anywho, thanks to everybody for tuning in. I'm TC. This is the Minnesota Black Robe Regiment channel. This is TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. Thanks for stopping in. Oh, yeah, it is Memorial Day weekend, and it's one of those, shall we say, strange days for a lot of people who find themselves um, in my shoes. There's no flag waving on Memorial Day for TC. There's no partying. There's no get-togethers. I don't even go to the Legion or VFW events because they've lost their oomph for TC. They've lost their oomph for me. And so while we're waiting for Gary to come in, I'm going to ask you guys to share this out. This is one of those really important conversations. This is why I do what I do. Gary is a grassroots guy, and I really want people to hear his story, especially folks over at Rocks and Cows, and then other people here on YouTube and Twix, and people in the rest of the world out there. So if you guys would, and I know, for like, some of you are on my channel because of you've seen some of my work with Flex Your Freedoms. Some of you made contact with me because of guys like the Angry Vet, and you keep coming back. So I really appreciate that. That's actually really important to me that you guys keep coming back, and it's touching because I know it's not in everybody's wheelhouse to come to a content-based channel like this where it's conversations. And so you guys, I really appreciate it. And some of you have joined the membership, quite a few of you actually, over the last couple of weeks. And that's been incredibly touching to me because of the fact that it's thrown a lot of support to me, to my channel, to my content. It helps me, keep the power on, if you will, keeps the lights on, keeps the internet going. And so having you guys come back for these conversations where I'm talking to people across the political spectrum, and I can't. That's not fair. I'm not talking to people across the political spectrum, really, because most of the time, what I end up doing is talking to libertarians and to grassroots, actual, genuine conservative Republicans, and that'd be guys like Gary who we're waiting on. So Gary will tell you himself he's an older fella. And so there's one person watching right now, 507. He's really old too. Yeah, I said it. You heard me. In fact, I'll tell you a little story about 507. He and I had a, had a had a meeting when he was in Fillmore County, and that which is down here in the southeast corner of Minnesota, and we walked through getting him set up on StreamYard, which is a platform that I use to stream when I'm doing these things. And the gist of it is like, all you have to do is do this and click on one button. And I made it sound super user friendly, but I'll tell you what, the first few times I tried to use StreamYard, I felt like an old man. Oh, guys, hold on just a second. Gary's calling back. So talks amongst yourselves. We're we're still having technical issues, folks. So once again, bear with us. Keith, excuse me, 507, did I see you say that's wisdom and not age? Is that what I read? Yeah, we'll leave that up there for a minute. Wisdom and not age, huh? You really want to go with that? Oh. See if that takes me in. Yeah, that took me in. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. What book am I reading right now? Hey, that's a great question while we're waiting. I just finished reading a book called The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It is a fiction. It is a work of fiction. It's actually it's only about a 6-hour read, 7-hour read, but it's kind of a dystopian at the end of years after a nuclear holocaust, and it's about a man and his son and their struggle to survive on the road. And it is not a good read in the sense of it's not uplifting and heartwarming. It is dark and tragic, and I cannot recommend it enough. If I were going to suggest something for people to be reading right now, beyond that, it would be Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard. Murray Rothbard is a deeply philosophical individual, and this is a really short read. It's total of 55 pages. So it's a great read because what it does is it goes in and it breaks down what the state is, how it functions, and why it's so dangerous. And it's terribly good. I'm communicating with Gary here, folks. So, but yeah. So if you haven't yet, you can actually get it for free, or you can order it through Amazon. And it's like I said, it's a great read. It gives you everything you need to know about why the the state is a terrible organization and a terrible entity, and why it's bad for you. And if you don't believe that the state's bad for you, I don't know that there's much help for you other than to tell you to keep coming back and tuning into the show. And and if you tune in on a regular basis and you still think the state's not bad for you, then you should grab a membership. But you're going to be required to take the highest level of membership, um, just because you deserve to be penalized. There, that'll tell you how the state works. And stand by, folks. Yeah, I. Oh, they made the road with Viggo Mortensen. I did not realize that. I have not seen that. Don't plan to. So while we're trying to figure out things here with Gary, hopefully he hopefully he can get it figured out on his end. That would be that would be superb. But while we're at it, I was gonna talk a little bit about um, some stuff, politically that's happening. So I want to tell you about my friend Rebecca Whiting. If you live here in Minnesota, this is going to be an extremely important conversation for a lot of people. Rebecca is running for Senate. She is running as the Libertarian nominee, and she is, I think, 1,500 signatures shy of the 2,000 she needs to be placed on the ballot now as a Senate candidate in the state of Minnesota. And the reason that that is so important is well, unlike the Republicans and the Democrats, once they get their nomination or party approval, they don't have to get on a they don't have to go out and get signatures. They don't have to be out drumming up signatures from people who don't know them from Adam to be approved to run for office. Here in the state of Minnesota, the third party candidates, anybody who's not a Republican or a Democrat, does need to do that. And Rebecca made the decision to challenge Amy Klobuchar for the Senate seat because she's quite frankly tired of the war hawkish, bloodthirsty, blood mongering, military industrial complex nature of Amy Klobuchar, and quite frankly, uh, what the mainstream get along to go along Republicans are like as well. I we're having so he's having troubles getting in. I don't know what it is. Um and I think this is probably the case in a lot of states with uh, candidates who are not considered two party or one of the two parties. They have to fight to get ballot access. Oh, technology, folks! I swear to you, I hate it. It just makes me so mad. Um, but anyway, they have to fight um, extra hard. So basically, they have to go through an election process to get to the election process, and that. Oh yeah, so he's using an iPhone. Does anybody use an iPhone for StreamYard? I don't know. Look at me being my own showrunner. Anywho, so if you're in the state of Minnesota and you're interested in seeing, if you're interested in seeing a third party candidate who actually has solid Minnesota values, like my friend Rebecca, find somebody that has petitions or reach out to the Minnesota Libertarian Party, and you can get a hold of the ballot there if you're a registered voter in the state of Minnesota, and or a voting age, excuse me, in the state of Minnesota, and you can sign up to, or not sign up, but sign the petition. Doesn't You're not promising to vote for Rebecca. You're not saying, "Hey, I believe everything that the Libertarian Party believes." All you're saying in that is that, "Hey, I want to give this third party person an opportunity to run for an office." And quite frankly, isn't that the way it should be? Isn't that precisely the way that it should be? Why do we have secretaries of state? Why do we have rules, regulations, policies, procedures, laws, whatever, codes, ordinances, whatever it is? Why do we have policies in place that take people who are citizens? And I struggle even using the word citizens, but members of the public, people who are naturalized citizens, or you know inherited their citizenship through birth, whatever you want to say. If they are Americans, why do they need to jump through hoops to go and do battle with the two-party system, with the duopoly, with the uniparty? Why do we allow that to happen? Why is that so? Why are there so many roadblocks in place? And what I would challenge you to do is, if you're outside of the state of Minnesota, I would challenge you to look and ask yourself, what's it like in my state? What's the process in my state? Why, is it as hard here as it is there and in Minnesota or other places? Because it really is. It's an insurmountable goal for a lot of people. So, I have another friend, TJ Hawthorne, who is running for his House district at the state level here in the state of Minnesota. And he has to go out and get signatures just to get on the ballot, because he's not a Republican and he's not a Democrat. He doesn't have an R behind his name. He doesn't have a D behind his name. And TJ, up until recently, would have considered himself a Republican. And boy, I made that bone broth a bit too salty, so I'm going to stop. Oh, I suppose it's probably salty bone broth is probably better than too strong of an adult beverage. And I wanted to be on my 100% on my game tonight. Clearly, it's working. Oh, There we go. This should work. He's on his laptop now, folks. So let's see. Let's see how this goes. But you know, TJ was somewhat disenfranchised with the Republican Party and just made the switch to the Libertarian Party. And for those of you that don't know what the Libertarian Party stands for or what it's all about, I would encourage you to go and check out my Libertarian Lowdown series. I started my third season on that, as well as this being the third season of TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. But go and check out my Libertarian Lowdown series, season 1, season 2, and listen to what the libertarian people that I have on have to say, and tell me if they don't sound like the founding fathers. And it really took me a long time to come around to the libertarian mentality and really begin to embrace it. And I'm a Johnny come lately to the ideas of the party. Um, yeah, I don't know what to tell you, folks. I don't know that I'm going to be able to. Well, you know what? Hold on. We're going to try something. Can you guys hear it ringing? Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear it ringing. So it looks like we're not going to be able to get you. For some reason, we're not going to be able to get you on camera through your system. I don't know what's going on there. So I have you on speakerphone, Gary, and we're going to try and run you through speaker into my microphone. Well, we're talking to you on the phone, and if you've got your laptop on and you go to the email that I sent you earlier, you should be able to click on that link on your laptop to open the StreamYard through your laptop. All right. No pressure. And okay. Okay, and now there should be another. Yep, enter studio. Everybody, say hi to Gary while he's entering the studio here, if we can get that to work. No, we don't. That's fine. You don't need to do that. Everybody's. It's interesting. Very, very strange. Is it giving you any kind of? Is it taking you anywhere? No. Yeah. Try entering your name and see if that's what it needs. Everybody should feel sorry for Gary. He's been busier and all get out this week, and he was out door knocking on Saturday, and I don't know what he did yesterday, but I know he's been busy beating on doors in a pleasant way. And there you go. We got you. Stand by. And ladies and gentlemen, we have Gary Steuart.
Now I don't hear you, Todd.
Nope, you
Hold
should
on.
have techno. There we go, folks. Share it out. Gary's plugging in. But yeah, as I was saying, as Gary's getting finished set up, we really need more. We need more competition in politics. We really do. We've got way too much um, cloistered mentality. Everybody thinks that the Democrats or the Republicans are going to save them. That's no slight to my guest is getting ready to come here. But there's just a lot of people who really do think that the answer is a two-party system. And there are people who, and I think Gary's going to give us some good answers tonight. There are people who are definitely, in the Republican structure. There we go. Can you hear us?
Can
Can you
you
hear
hear
me?
me okay?
I hear you. Do you hear me?
No, I'm not hearing you.
How about now? Can you hear me at all? Oh boy.
Testing.
I
You
got
hearing
you.
me?
Yep, I got you.
Okay. I can hear you somewhat.
All right. Well,
Um,
I will speak clearly and uh hopefully capably.
okay.
So, thanks for doing this. Sorry that I know you've been busier and I'll get out.
Not a problem. It looks like we're going to get it done.
Yeah. So, the chat is telling us that they can hear us both. So, Gary, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here in Fillmore County.
Um, well, I run a small business over in Mabel. We've been at it for a lot of years. We manufacture topical over-the-counter health products. We started out with veterinary products, and for the people that are listening that are farm kids, they understand that if it works in the barn, it ends up in the house. And from that, we gravitated into some people products. Our single seller is a product for joint and muscle pain. Um, I've always paid some attention to politics. And back in 2014, I got involved on the Republican side a little more with helping Jim Hagedorn run for Congress. Uh, and then I ended up as a chair of Fillmore County Republicans in 2015, and continued working with Jim Hagedorn. And he was finally able to get elected in 2018. Uh, Part of that effort, of course, was supporting Greg Davids, the Republican in the Minnesota House. Uh, I've always uh, I've always supported him until I came to the point where I realized that Greg was most interested in staying in office and less interested in representing his constituents.
And you don't say something like that lightly. That's not a easy statement for you to make.
That's right. Um, you know, I've essentially always been a conservative, um, voted for Republicans, and Greg was a Republican on the ballot, and I felt that he was our best choice. Um, he's never had a real serious challenge from the Republican side since I've been in Fillmore County.
Well, I think since I've been in Fillmore County, there's only been one very brief span where he was actually out of office. Then he lost to, I don't even remember who it was now.
Ken Shumper,
Yeah, Ken Shumper.
a liberal, kind of off the charts to the left. Um, and Greg was out 2 years, and then he got back in.
Yeah. So I mean, this whole area, this district, it's been different districts numerous times now since I've gotten to the area. I think when I first got here, it was House District 31 or House District 30 or Senate District 30 or 31, something like that. And but they got one taste of Ken Shumper and far left political spectrum, and quickly went back to the Republicans. But over the years, you become somewhat disenfranchised with the representation that we've been getting from Greg, and that's what moved you as a party chair, which is not incredibly common very often for a local BPOU. That's local party for people outside of Minnesota. It's not very common for someone who's the local chair to actually step up and run against a sitting office holder.
And I didn't really intend to run against him. Uh, I several people were thinking about running against him, and I'd heard it for 3 or 4 years. People would say, I've even thought of running against Greg. Well, uh, but I called Greg over a year ago, and I told him, I said, we're going to run somebody against you. And I told him that wasn't Fillmore County Republicans, but it was myself and a group of people across the district. And I told him at that time, I said, I'm calling you and telling you so you don't think we're stabbing you in the back. And the next time he came to a Republican meeting, he accused us of stabbing him in the back. But I wanted to let him know we weren't happy. I'd been telling him since prior to the 2022 election that he had some problems in the district, and that status quo Republicans in general had problems within our voters. We're within the block of voters.
And so you made the tough decision to step up because it's awkward. I mean, most people do not handle conflict well, and it's just they don't start out their day looking for conflict. And so you made that decision and took it to the district nominating convention. Uh, was that did you get a lot of support before the convention going into it? Were people asking you what your concerns were? And do you want to share some of your concerns?
Well, there were conversations all along. And of course, uh, Kate Snodgrass from Houston County did
Mhm.
challenge Greg for the endorsement in 2022. And Greg won that endorsement. Then he was challenged by Laura Thorson in the primary in 2022, which he won. But there were a group of us that were having these conversations, and uh, if you look at Greg's voting record, he every once in a while he'll veer left. Uh,
Can you give us
but
an
what?
example of a left-handed or a directionally left veer off the top of your head? And if you can't, that's fine. I mean, certainly
Yeah,
we can
uh,
look up his record.
yeah. I don't have the record in front of me. I don't have to get that phone, by the way. Um, but um, he would probably the biggest concern was that he was so silent on the medical freedom things. When we were gonna, when I told him we were going to run somebody against him, I told him that one of my big concerns was that he was uncurious about election fraud. And I was convinced we're on the edge of losing this country. And one of the prime reasons is because they're stealing the elections. Now, I'm sorry,
You're good.
I didn't silence that. Um, but in retrospect, Greg's been winning his elections. Um,
So
so
it's
I
hard
guess
for someone who's winning his elections to be concerned about election fraud. It's
right. So that was not a concern to him. Um, and I hold on. I apologize. I can't.
trust me. I've had much worse interruptions.
Yeah. Um, so he wasn't concerned about
We're getting
election.
back. Yeah, back up a little bit because your audio just got really weird.
Um,
There we
so
go.
he's not concerned about election fraud. And
Adjust your mic.
I don't.
Did you have? There you go. Yes, yeah. Stay back a little bit.
Okay, you can
There
hear
you
me
are.
good.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, so the election fraud was a real issue. In fact, he was kind of deriding our efforts to raise awareness. We had people like Doug Frank, who works for Mike Lindell, come into Fillmore County and do a meeting on it. We had a guy like Seth Keschel come to Southeast Minnesota and talk about election fraud. Um, and one of the things that concerned me with Greg was, or concerned me with Greg was that we would get these half truths. And in 2022, we lost control of our legislature. The Democrats got control of it all. And Greg ascribed that loss to conservative Republicans challenging incumbents. When in there was some truth to that. Yes, the conservatives were upset, but in 2022, I believe it was 7 races where conservative Republicans won the endorsement.
Yeah, and won their
And
seats.
right, and the HRCC uh, and the leader of that was Kurt Dowd, and Greg Davids was supposed to be associated with him. Ran
Yeah, stay
primaries
back.
on
Just
them.
yes, yeah, right there. Stay back just a little bit.
Okay, ran primaries on them, and I think the primary challengers were unsuccessful, but some of those people lost their races in the general election. And the story was, well, that wasn't Republicans doing that. Um, some of the money did come from the HRCC, which is Republicans, and
Yeah.
more of the money came from the Minnesota Jobs Coalition, which was closely associated with Kurt Dowd. So
Yes.
we're talking different pockets, but it's the same pair of pants.
That's a
Then,
very nice way of putting it. It just
yeah,
sounds
uh,
sounds sketchy as heck to me. It's like,
yeah, and perhaps your listeners are aware of how we lost the Senate. Um, but Tom DePel was the endorsed candidate, conservative. Tony Jurgens lost that endorsement to him. Tony
mhm.
Jurgens had been a member of the Minnesota House, and he was a left-leaning Republican. So Tony Jurgens ran a primary on Tom DePel, and Tony Jurgens was assisted by Minnesota Senate Republicans.
Yep.
And Tony
And
Jurgens lost. Go ahead.
nobody wants to talk and nobody wants to talk about that.
That's right. And then when Tony Jurgens lost the primary, then the Republicans in the Senate realized everything was at risk. And so they got on board helping Tom DePel,
Mhm.
except Tony Jurgens endorsed the Democrat. Tom
Yep.
DePel lost that race in the general election by about 320 votes. So that's how we lost control of our government. Not because conservatives were challenging incumbents, but because some of the more liberal members of our legislature were challenging conservatives. Greg Davids never explained that to us. Now, I don't blame Greg for the loss of the Senate,
Sure.
but I do hold him accountable for the loss of some of those House seats because he raised money for the Minnesota House Republican Caucus, and he worked with them quite closely.
Right. And that's, there's been a lot of talk about, this kind of this quiet uh, gentleman's club that everybody has this mythical idea, or somebody I know talked about, well, I had this mythical idea that when I got to the house, these people in black suits were going to approach me and tell me this is how I was going to have to play ball. And that never happened. And the problem is they don't have to approach you. They just play ball. They just play ball the way they play ball. And if you don't toe the party line, you don't get appointments to the committees. You don't get appointments to certain positions, and you're isolated and you're ostracized, and you really don't get a say in anything. So your vote really doesn't matter, especially when you've got people like Kurt Dowd and the former, Paul Gazelka, who are willing to play ball and reach across the aisle and compromise with the side that, hates liberty loving or conservative value type Republicans or libertarians or independents or whoever. They'll play ball to get along, to go along. And that's really what a lot of people that I've talked to in this area have said they've seen from our district is either silence, which has been a willingness to not rock the boat, or just flat out joining in with the deterioration of Minnesota values in the House and the Senate. And as I told you when we were talking about having you on, I'm going to offer Greg the opportunity after this. I'm going to reach out to him and offer him an opportunity to come on and talk about why he's choosing to challenge you in the primary. And you flat out, to your credit, you thought that was a fine idea, didn't you?
That he would challenge me?
No, that I would have him on to talk about it.
Oh, yes. Yes, he has a right to be heard. He's a legitimate candidate.
Are you getting a lot of feedback now that you're out door knocking and talking to people? Are you hearing much about, well, I know Greg, I'll vote for him in the primary, or I'm glad there's finally somebody else to vote for, or what's it been like over the last couple of weeks?
Um, there's a general feeling across the district that Greg has been there too long. And that's a bit stronger in Fillmore County because he's always represented Fillmore County. At
Yep.
times, he hasn't had parts of Houston and parts of Mauer. Uh, his Achilles heel is that he's just been there too long. And most of us don't understand why it's so important for him to stay there. Um, he's got to be maxed on retirement, or I think. Uh, I just don't understand it.
Which opens a completely different philosophical conversation when it comes to politicians and their retirement funds and how much they get paid in the first place. No offense, I know you're running for office, but if I had it my way, nobody that holds office would get paid a dime at this rate. But that's just me. So, um, we had a little bit of a tough conversation when we talked the other night on the phone, not between us, but there's some concern on your part that people are going to try and bring up some past issues for you, some family issues and stuff. And I asked you if we could talk about it, and you said, yeah, let's talk about it. And so, without going into great personal detail, Gary, um, tell us what your Achilles heel is as far as it's been communicated to you from insiders.
Um, well, the first issue that, and everybody has a right to know this, is my age. I'm 77 years old. And I get it. My life is half over, at least.
I love it. Oh, the man's got a
Um,
sense of humor.
so
That can't happen, Gary. You can't have a sense of humor and run for office. It's just impossible.
it's impossible for a Democrat. Um, but and I went through a very messy divorce. Back, it started in 2001, uh, and there were four school-age children involved. I ended up raising two. Their mom ended up raising the other two most of the time. It was a joint custody, but I had physical custody of two. So, um, and I ended up, I always had to pay child support because I had a higher level of income. Uh,
Funny
but
how that works in Minnesota.
yes, uh, and it was the system favors women usually, but so be it. But Greg has floated the idea that I was a deadbeat dad, which is not true. Um,
And this is coming to you from people who have heard this directly. This isn't just you assuming this. This is something that you've gotten from
right.
reliable sources.
And Greg has phrased it this way. He said, "This is off the record, but the Democrats are going to use this." Um, and the deadbeat dad surprised me because all the child support was paid up. It was totally current when the last child turned 18. But uh, Greg has told people in the district, he's told people in the House of Representatives. Um, and I expect, in fact, I would think opponents would be fools not to look at those records. It just makes sense. But as
Yeah,
an opponent, it ought to be reflected accurately.
well, I think the frustrating thing about that is that it's the way it was said. Like, oh, the Democrats are going to use this, and and that's how it's being relayed to you. And to me, that sounds an awful lot like I'm going to make sure that they have this information and know to look into it. That's what it sounds like to me. I'm not saying that's what happened, but when you hear a fellow Republican say, "Oh, they're going to use this," and that's your that's the go-to because it's pretty easily defensible against the Democrats who don't want to have anybody held accountable for anything ever.
Right. Unless you're a conservative,
Well,
uh,
yeah, but
then they hold your feet to the fire. Um, so I think, um,
and you
and
can produce the records that show that you're not a deadbeat dad.
right. And I did go into the courthouse and pull the last court order, and there was no reference to that. And in that court order, I had my child support reduced substantially. That was in 2009, March or May, and 2008, fall of 2008 was when we had a crash, and our business shrunk dramatically. We nearly went out of business in 2009.
But
Um,
you managed to keep it afloat.
that's right. I was down to one employee, but we kept operating. And now I'm directly employing six, and we had spun off part of the business 5, 6 years ago, and they've got about 30 employees. Uh,
So you survived the crash in 2008, brought the business back to the point where you could spin it off and um, really be responsible for 30 other people having, well, not counting the people you spun the business off to, but 30 other people now have income because you saved a business at a time where it was touch and go.
yeah, very difficult times, and so and those things happen in business. There's times that you have reversals. Uh,
Sure.
we worked through it. And interestingly, my youngest daughter will tell you that she never noticed a difference. She was provided for. The court-ordered child support was paid, plus all of the extras that you do as a parent.
My friend Pat from way up north, he's the northern Sasquatch. He's asking how the convo is going. I think it's going fine now that we got Gary in. I don't know. Gary may never do this again after he talks to me tonight. I don't know. He goes, but he said, "Where's he out of? He is out of." Contrary to my my typo earlier, he is in House District 22B, Senate District 22 in the southeast corner of Minnesota, which covers all of Fillmore County, part of Mower County, and part of Houston County, correct?
It covers, and it's 26B now,
Yeah,
not
26B.
22. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Houston County, Fillmore County, and 4 townships on the eastern side of Mower County.
So there, Pat, he's a grassroots guy, literally down here in the grassroots of Minnesota. In one of the and Pat, you can relate to this because you know what it's like. He's in one of the poorest counties in the state of Minnesota. People do not realize that, but Fillmore County is not up there for the highest wage earners in the state of Minnesota. So we have a lot of rural Minnesota concerns down here, and a lot of people have questions about how we're represented up in the Twin Cities when it comes to that. When you think about running, and you're thinking about running at a time where there's a lot of uproar in the Republican Party, and we discussed this a little bit in the pre-show call a few days ago. There's a lot of questions about GOP leadership, and rightly so. You've mentioned a little bit of it with Kurt Dowd and some of his decisions, and there are other people involved with that. When you think about what current executive committee leadership of the Republican Party is doing and the direction they're headed, you look at what they did with Wendy, unseating her unceremoniously a couple of weeks ago from her executive committee position because they were mad at her for some of her positions and some of the help she was providing to places like Ottertail County. When you think about the positions you hold, say, where are you on First Amendment issues? Are you a First Amendment absolutist? Do you believe in free speech? Where are you on the Second Amendment? How do you feel about gun control as it's being presented? Because those are issues. When you look at the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment that they've tried to force through, and the things they've tried to force through and have forced through when it comes to gun control in the House with their trifecta, are you going to be able to go up there and represent rural Minnesota on those issues and be vocal and fight for it?
I intend to. Now, I realize right now we don't have a majority in anything.
Right.
So, and I think that'll change. I think we can get the majority of the House back, and we might even be able to flip a Senate seat. But if we don't have the majority, we still have a voice. And there's a young group, primarily a younger group, freshman legislators. There were 25 elected in 2022, and 20 plus of them have been real advocates for freedom. On the Second Amendment, I believe we should be a constitutional carry state. And
You heard that here, folks. Constitutional carry state. I cannot think of a member of anybody in Minnesota that's in my neck of the woods that's run for local office like that who said that in a very long time.
And that's the only right that we have to get a permit in order to exercise it. And I think it is probably the most critical. That and the freedom of speech. But because we have the right to keep and bear arms, I believe that we're protecting those other rights. So free speech is critical. Second Amendment's critical. Medical freedom is critical. They stomped all over us on that one with the mask mandates, vaccine mandates for some people. Uh, and Greg Davids was silent on that. Uh, as far as I know, and I heard criticism from other people in the district that emailed him and he said, "What can I do? We don't have the majority." And but he did announce that he got the vaccine, which is his
Mhm.
right. But and now we find out, you know, we were treated like we were crazy when we didn't want to wear the masks, we didn't want to get the vaccines, and now we're finding out that the masks didn't do any good, that they did some harm. We're finding out that our kids should have been allowed in school. We're finding out that the vaccines have done a lot of harm. And Greg Davids was silent. And, you know, Jim Hagedorn used to talk about this. Uh, Tim Walz closed down our churches. And he used to say that it was the first time in 400 years that the Lutherans and the Catholics had gotten together. When the Lutherans and the Catholics wrote a letter to Tim Walz and informed him that they were going to open their churches. And lo and behold, Tim Walz thought it was okay. The Catholics and the Lutherans didn't have any votes, but they had a voice. And our voice, which was Greg Davids, was silent. And I don't believe we heard anything from our senator either about that. So
Yeah,
when we
that's a
get
good
down to
point. Just so people know, because I was talking to somebody on the phone earlier today who's part of an organization here that may euphemistically would be known as Rocks and Cows, and this individual was talking about how many people don't know who their member of the House of Representatives is at the state level, or who their senator is. Um, Obviously, we know we have Greg Davids in 26B. Who's in 26A, and who's the senator for District 26, Senate District 26?
26A, the House member has been a guy named Pulowski who's retiring. So that's an open seat now in this election. Jeremy Miller is our senator in Senate District 26. He's not up for reelection, but we will have that election in 2 years. I haven't heard if he's going to run again, but there will be an election for the Minnesota Senate. And we may indeed flip that uh, House seat in Winona County. Um, and
That's a tough sell with Winona being Winona State up there.
yeah, and then another college. But um, I believe the Democrats are getting turned off too. I mean, what parent thinks that we need to have tampons in the boys' bathrooms?
Well, that's just because you're a closed-minded bigot, Gary, and you don't understand science. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
says the guy who's talking to the guy who has a company that's kind of founded on medicine. But
yeah.
um,
I'm stuck on two genders. Um,
I think we all are, Gary. I think we all are. Um,
Now, I gotta admit, I hope you'll allow me a little X-rated conversation. Uh,
you have
as a
no
young
idea what my
teenage
channel's
boy,
like.
there was a hermaphrodite at the county fair. For 50 cents, you could go look, and I did.
What was
Uh,
that, like 1902, Gary? What are you trying to do here?
no, it was probably 1965 or 64, but and we see this in the animal world. Once in a while, you get a hermaphrodite, but we identify them as such. You know when they're born what they are. Uh, but
This is
I
going to
mean,
make you unpopular, though, with even the mainstream Republicans. And I know you're being, you were being tongue in cheek to a degree, but I don't think people understand how important even this conversation is because, I have a lot of friends in the libertarian movement who are having this exact same conversation right now. They're like we don't want to tell people how to live their lives. We just don't want them coming into our schools or into our communities telling us how to live our lives. And there are Republicans that are fully on board with this. How are you going to combat that mentality when they start to ask you these hard questions like, well, don't you think that everybody has a right to live their life? Because you're not saying people in the LGBTQ plus community should be all be rounded up and put into camps. That's not your position.
no, we give them the right to live their life. They can choose their partners as long as they're adults. We don't restrict that. Um, and generally, we treat those people decently. I think probably more decently than we're being treated now by their side, at least by the radicals that are demanding all these extra rights. Uh, and I know liberal people, I know conservative people. Uh, I know a lot of decent, fair-minded liberals, and they want their kids to be safe. They want their kids to be educated. They want their kids to have a hope for their future. And what's being offered to us now by the liberals in this state is not a message of hope. They're bringing us into tyranny. Um, there's nothing positive about that. Uh, when the state can come in and shut down a business, uh, and for instance, some of these mom and pop restaurants, they shut down stores, made them wear masks, and they let the Walmarts and the big box folks stay open. The liquor stores could stay open, uh, and I had a family member that owned a liquor store, and after he watched the devastation that was caused by the lockdowns, he got tired of the liquor business and sold it because people had greater problems with their addictions because they couldn't work, because they were isolated, and they spent more money in his liquor store. But he decided he didn't like that business after watching what was happening. So
But the answer to that is not what a lot of people suspect of most Republicans is the answer to the left-wing authoritarian tyranny that causes a rise in addictions, whatever it might be, isn't the transverse, which is right-wing authoritarians, which are going to come in and shut down all those things. The answer is a balance, correct?
correct. South Dakota let the people make their decisions. Um, they weren't ravaged by COVID. Um, they didn't single out their business places. We never had any issues
They
with
also
our
had the
own.
most attractive governor in the history of the United States. I just want to throw that out there. So,
Yeah, and she became very well known. Um,
she has her own problems.
yeah, we did not. We never mandated masks in our shop. Um, we we kept our
Well, that
doors
let's
open.
so let's talk about that a little bit. And I don't want to keep you for too long because I know you got a lot of campaigning and you got work. I know you got a lot of work going on over the next couple of days. Um, what did that, as you prepare to run for, or as you are running now to in the primary, and then we'll see how it goes at the primary level. in the general election in November. What does your experience resisting mandates, because you were ordered by Commissar Walls of the People's State of Marxisota that even in your small business everybody had to be masked up, and even the jab mandates came down, and eventually it was pretty much everybody had to get it to keep working, and you said no to all of those. How is that going to translate to, even if the Democrats keep the trifecta, let's say the next go around happens and you're in office, how will that translate for you representing your district and ultimately representing the people of Minnesota?
Well, first of all, um, I wasn't the science denier, um, but they didn't have the science on their side, and now we've got a whole lot more data, uh, multiple side effects from the vaccine, um, uh, cardiac issues, respiratory issues, uh, some neurological issues. It goes on and on. And Scott Jensen, our candidate for governor, said early on in this race that you wouldn't keep mosquitoes out of your yard with a chain link fence. And he said that's about how effective the masks are in keeping the viruses out. And now we know uh,
Mm-hmm.
that stuff didn't work. And I think, yes, if they keep the trifecta, they will try again. But public opinion is going to be on our side to a greater extent than it was 3 and 4 years ago.
You see it?
People,
You really see it that way, Gary?
absolutely.
Well, let me ask it from this perspective. Let me try it this way then. Are you saying that in the totality of your experience in the district, especially in Fillmore County? Because as I look around, I'm seeing people who would very willingly go right back to it again if their comfort and their ease are threatened. Like, oh, if I'm going to lose my job, or if I'm not allowed to shop, I'll comply with whatever they're going to demand that I do. Are you talking predominantly to people in Fillmore County? Because we were kind of a rebellious lot down here.
I spend most of my time in Fillmore, Houston, and of course Mower County. And that eastern part of Mower County is pretty much like Fillmore and Houston.
Okay.
Yes, people, they're waking up. 2 years ago, a friend of mine who had had a heart attack the same day he got his third booster, um, a few weeks later told me how I should get the vaccine. Today, he will tell me that third booster caused his heart attack because he had more than one doctor tell him that. Um, that's only one person, but there are just so many more out there. Uh, I talk to people almost every day who wish they had not taken the vaccine. There's a name uh, that you'll hear tossed around some. Her name is Karen Kingston. She
Mm-hmm.
she's somewhat well known. Met her in 2020 at an event, and she was a speaker, and I asked her what her topic was, and she said the shot. I said, you didn't call it a vaccine, and she said it's not a vaccine. And she went on to tell me she thought it was a bioweapon. Now, she was right. She used to be a device analyst for Pfizer. Uh, she had the data, and she could talk about the side effects that we were going to see, and that has happened. Uh, these people with their tyranny have dug themselves a hole, and it's going to be much harder pushing us back into their system again, even if they have control of both houses and the governorship.
Let's say hypothetically it is something like that again, and you get a call from a local business, and that local business person is saying, like, I don't want to comply with any of this stuff. what would you recommend I do?
I would
This is all
say,
hypothetical, of course.
that's right. And I would say, don't comply and communicate with as many like-minded people as you know in your community. One person alone doesn't have a lot of influence, but if there's a group of us, it does. And take a book out of the Catholic and the Lutheran page. Resist. Tell the governor you're going to resist, and if you got enough people behind you, they're not going to make it happen.
Yeah, it's I look at the situation with Lisa Hanson over in Albert Lee, and I think it had other businesses like hers in that area, and just in Freeborn County alone, and especially within Albert Lee. If other businesses had said, "Nope, enough's enough, we're not going to do this," Lisa would not have been the easy target that she was. But because a lot of people were giving lip service to agreeing with what she was doing, but not giving any actual physical support in the sense of actually keeping their businesses open and doing what she was doing, she became a very easy target. And I think you're 100% correct. If all the small businesses just finally kind of, give the metaphorical middle finger philosophically to the state at any of her levels, then they really can start to make a difference. And we see that all the time with peaceful protests, and I mean actual peaceful protests. When the cops show up and say, "Hey, you can't be here," and there's 300 people and there's 30 cops, they can't arrest everybody, so they just kind of keep on going. And um, there again, I'm not advocating for non or for violent protests. I just mean actual peaceful protests. I tell that to school board parents all the time now, with school boards using all sorts of weird tactics to keep people out of school board meetings, and even city councils. Well, they told us that we can't speak if we're, if we're all talking about the same topic. And I'm like, they can't stop you from speaking. Well, what if they arrest us? I'm like, you really think that your local deputy is going to want to arrest 55 people? It's just not, especially in Fillmore County. The jail just doesn't have that much room. But
That's right. And they're going to be reluctant to arrest people that have no criminal history.
well, you would hope so. Yes.
Now, um, I don't trust the heads of our state government right now. I think our governor would have no concern about arresting an innocent person. Uh, but we have our voice, and when we make our collective voice heard, it will make a difference. The good part is I'm confident that we're going to turn this legislature around. I believe we can get the majority in this next election. And I
Are you
don't
thinking
believe
just the House, or do you think
um, the House, yes, uh, even considering that the state Republican Party may not be functioning real well, there are local units that are functioning well, and uh, we can win enough of these House races. Uh, Greg Davids has said in Fillmore County, we can win if he wins. We don't have to have Greg as our candidate to win this election.
are
And
you oh, go ahead, finish your thought.
well, and there's a group of legislators in the Minnesota House now that have become very effective, even though they're in the minority. And the leadership of the House Republican caucus has a different attitude than the leadership under Kurt Dowd. Uh, it's a different ball game.
Real quick, have you communicated at all and talked to anybody like, say, Wes Lund up in Rochester, who is the House candidate up there, um, about how you guys can help each other out or feed off of each other?
I, I've known him for a few years
We're losing your audio a little bit. Come back more towards your center.
Okay.
There you
I've
go.
known him for a few years. We spoke briefly, but no, we haven't done any kind of collaboration. I'm not even, is Wes endorsed at this point now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And he doesn't have a primary opponent, does he?
I don't believe so off the top of my head.
So,
I got to get him on. That's how I keep talking to him about having him on. So
yeah, haven't really spoken to him much other than 5 minutes at the state convention a week ago.
I always advocate for bordering districts to work, in tandem, especially when you've got something, when you've got Chatfield, which is split. You get half of Chatfield is in Fillmore County and the other half of Chatfield is in Olmsted County, which I think ultimately, do you get all of Chatfield or is it split then for the district?
It's split at the Olmsted County line. Steve Jacobs is the rep.
Okay.
He's the incumbent, and I think he'll be reelected.
Okay.
I know he's very.
So Wes
open.
must have the northern part of Olmsted then.
Wes is, I think his district is only in Rochester.
Oh, okay. Rochester's big enough; it's got its own district then.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah. So, but yeah, we'll do what we can to collaborate. Frankly, I've spent most of my time on the 26B.
Absolutely. I did not realize that Wes wasn't. I thought Wes came all the way down to the Fillmore County, Olmsted County line, but I did not realize that he doesn't. So that was a stupid question on my part. So
No,
color me educated today.
Yeah. And as far as the HRCC, they have a different attitude than they did under Kirk Dowd. Now, the HRCC has not said they were going to stay out of this race. Greg Davids is saying they're totally behind him. I don't believe that's true, but they're also not helping me at this point.
Well, then we need to find out. Why, because you're the endorsed candidate.
Well, and see, the HRCC is a different entity than the Minnesota Republicans. And of course, Greg is a member of the HRCC.
Sure they are, but they're still Republicans.
I agree. I think there's a fear on their part that if
they feel like they're losing control.
Right. And if they don't support Greg and he wins, then he may be angry. And they don't want to jeopardize an incumbent. When I started telling House Republicans that I was going to run against Greg Davids, I got a lot of silence and not much encouragement. But I did send the message to one of them, and I said, look, well, this is how I worded it. I said, you have an opportunity to tie a tin can to Greg's tail. Why don't you do it? He's not popular in the House of Representatives. He's known as a bully. He throws his weight around, and that's his style. And he does that to a degree in the district. And some of these reps do talk to me, and they agree that they would be better off without him. He doesn't always vote the way they would like. He doesn't participate in a lot of the caucus meetings. He's said for years that he doesn't talk to freshman legislators. He's been known to say things like freshmen should be heard or seen and not heard. But yet,
you've got to be kidding me.
no, that's true. And in fact, when I challenged him on it, he said that it was a joke. Well, if it was a joke, I believed
Why is
him.
it so well known?
Yeah.
It's-
And
it's-
if it's a joke, it's a bad one. And he's repeated it way too many times. It just, yeah, I've been told that he's not a team player. And
So we're coming up on 9:30, and we both have work in the morning. You probably earlier than me, but maybe not by much. Um, I have the link to your campaign site in the description of the video. But if people want to reach out to you and they want to offer, help, if there's anything they can do, how can they find you besides your campaign website?
that's the best way. That
Okay.
Gary Steuart for Minnesota.com. This type of campaign is work. So if anybody's would like to volunteer, if you'd like to walk in a parade with us, get a hold of us. I'm on Facebook, but you can find all of that on the website and reach out to us.
And if somebody is from out of district, but they got a free weekend for a parade, you'll take their walking help.
That's right. And donations can cross district lines.
Yep.
And of course, there is some need for money. But especially the people in the district, I want them to know that I will listen to them and that I will be their voice in turn.
So I'm gonna ask a closing question here, and I want you to, I don't want to say think about it because I know you're thinking through all of this, but there's a growing movement of disenfranchisement amongst even older voters like myself who are, I know you the other day you're like you're still a kid. I darn sure don't feel that way with grandchildren in my life now. But there's a growing feeling and movement of disenfranchisement amongst people who would have once considered themselves Republican, and people who would have once considered themselves moderate Democrats. And they're looking at things like a more conservative libertarianism, and they're saying ultimately down the road, a lot of the people that I hear talking on behalf of the Republicans or behalf of the Democrats, they don't really represent where I'm at on a lot of things. And if you were talking to one of those more conservative, traditional type, maybe libertarian leaning individuals who might exist in your district, who maybe disagree, and I don't know what your stance is on the legalization of marijuana, but maybe they're like, no, I think we should be able to have dispensaries, and you personally don't feel that way. How would you reach across that gap to that person and say, we can overcome this? What would your sales pitch to that person be, as in a quick open the door conversation, because you know how fast people will shut those doors most of the time.
Are we speaking particularly about the marijuana issue?
No, but they say, hey, look, I'm a libertarian or I'm an independent who believes in the legalization of marijuana, and you're a Republican, and I know Republicans don't support legalization, so I'm not voting for you no matter what else we agree on.
Well, okay. Here's how
without it being about the marijuana. That's just what they're saying is I agree with you on everything else, but you completely missed the boat on this one.
Our biggest problem in Minnesota is a government that's too big, that takes too much of a bite out of us. Alan Keyes ran for president back, I think, in 2012. Black guy, brilliant guy. And he talked about how his ancestors were slaves. And he said, now they have a different way of enslaving us. They do it with taxes. They do it by taking our money. We're financial slaves. We've got to reduce the size of this government. I don't support recreational marijuana. I think I think medically it's got some real valid uses. But my biggest concern is young people using it when their brains are still developing. That's when it does the most damage, and I want some really good controls on that. I don't want our kids damaging themselves before they're old enough to make some decisions about that. But beyond that, we need more freedom, and we're not going to have more freedom until we reduce the size of our government. And when we do that, taxes will go down. We need to get control of our schools, control of our local governments. We need less mandates from the state.
And that would be your sales pitch
That's right.
to that
And
person.
And, you know, I believe in term limits. And here's my promise. 30 years from now, I'm not going to be sitting here asking for an endorsement.
That's a pretty safe bet.
That's right.
That's a pretty, but you are, you said you're 77, so you're halfway through your life. So, 30 years from now, you might still be feeling your oats. You might still be full of piss and vinegar, Gary. I don't know.
Well, but I believe in the concept of the citizen legislator. I'll go and serve. Hopefully, I get elected, Lord willing. I expect I would serve 2-3 terms. And there should be somebody else that wants to step in and do it.
You mean you're not going to stay there for 30 years?
That's right.
Like you said?
It just, our country wasn't set up to run that way. We need people that have a broad understanding of how our culture works, how the business world works. If somebody spends 30 plus years in one position in the government, their focus is going to be pretty narrow. And I think Greg Davids is affected by that.
Well, Gary, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your perspective, and I just wanted people to hear who you were. I didn't want this to be strictly about everything that was wrong with Greg and strictly about, here's every single fine point on all, every single issue, because quite frankly, you can beat that stuff to death when ultimately what people want to know is who you are as a human being. And I think that you've expressed that today. And so, if there's other topics that come up here between now and primary, or even general election, depending on how primary goes, and you want to talk about them, or you'd like to air those, let me know. And like I said, I'm going to reach out to Greg. I'm going to shoot him a message and say, hey, I had Gary on. I'd like to get you on before the primary and give you that equal opportunity. So like you said, he has a right to be heard, and I didn't want to be a surprise to you, but I did want to give you the first shot at this since you had the endorsement. And if there's anything, like I said, you want to talk about in the future, you let me know. Now we know how to make it work for you.
Yes.
So
thanks for the time. Thanks for the use of your platform, Todd.
Oh, nobody's going to know who I am when you say Todd. Everybody's used to calling me TC. So
TC. Okay.
No, you're fine.
Well,
Gary and I knew each other years ago, and we discovered that on the phone the other night. So,
and I thought you had disappeared, And I was so excited when I found out you hadn't. But
Don't let that
good
get
to
out
meet
there.
you
People
again.
will not believe it. So,
Thank you
well,
for your time.
I appreciate your time. Now you go get ready for your work, all your work over the next couple of days, and I'll let you go, and I'll do my sign off.
All right. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night. Folks, this is what you see happening in the realm of politics is when you run into a person who just gets to the point where something's got to change. I'm going to have to make tough decisions. And that's, what you heard with Gary at the beginning of this conversation. He's like, something's got to change and tough decisions have to be made. And he approached it like a gentleman would approach things. And that's what's really amazing. You don't see that in politics, especially within the Democrat Party or the Republican Party much anymore. There is a lot of backstabbing that happens in a lot of those places. And yet here you have Gary approached his competitor and Greg and said, look, we're going to run against you. We're running people against you. We're going to find somebody. It just happened to be Gary in this case. And Gary went in to the nominating convention and won handily in the first vote. That never happens. I can't say never, but I mean, he won handily in the first vote in this district. 26 in the 26B district, Senate District 26. Folks, that's an unheard of situation. And it sends a message really to a lot of the clingers on within the Republican Party. And as everybody knows, I'm not affiliated with the Republicans. I have a lot of paleo-conservative values. I have a lot of paleo-libertarian values, and my voting options are incredibly limited where I am. There are no libertarian candidates down here that I'm aware of that are running for office. And no, that is not me telling people to tell me that how I feel about running for office. That's not happening. That's not in TC's realm of possibility. I do what I do. I do the things that I do. I do my activism, and that's what I do. I'm not running for office. I'm not getting myself drugged through that mud. But folks, this is why politics matter. I hear this all the time from people. It's such an arrogant perspective. I don't care about politics. I've got better things to do with my time. And, I can't remember who said it, but you may not care about politics, but politics damn sure cares about you. And they do. Politicians on both sides of the aisle with the duopoly, they give a whole big damn about you. Not because they want to do what's best for you, because what's best for you is as little involvement from them as possible. They give a damn about you because they want what you have. They want to take it from you and they want to use it on their agenda. And, you heard Gary address that last question that I asked him. How do you talk to the libertarian who maybe has a lot of, or independent or constitutionalist, whatever the case might be, who has a lot of the same views as you, but is openly for the legalization or decriminalization of cannabis? And he's like, I don't agree with it, but I want small government. I want a much smaller government because the smaller the government is, the better off everybody else's life is. Folks, short of coming out and saying, I want to abolish government, that's about as libertarian as you can get in Southeast Minnesota. Really. So if you're that person that leans libertarian and there's nobody on the ticket for you to vote for, look for a guy like Gary. You can work on him on those other issues. You really can. Now, I might have some libertarian friends who'd come on Libertarian Lowdown, who would say, nope, can't work on a person like that. Their mind's made up. But you know what? Anybody who would tell you that their mind is completely made up on an issue has just not thought through the issue 100%. Now, there are some issues that you're not going to get me to move on. Absolutely won't get me to move on, and I'll admit it. But I'll steelman the crap out of your argument for your side. I will. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you, but I can steel man it. But it's time that we start, I'll use the example of the Defend the Guard legislation that as many of you know, I'm passionate about, passionately active about as well. When I served as the MC at the last event back in March, there wasn't a single Democrat there in attendance or speaking. But there were members of the Constitutionalist Party, Constitutional Party, or Constitutional Republic Party of Minnesota. There were Republicans there speaking. Nate Wiesenberg, who holds Republican Senate seat. There were people from the People's Movement for Democracy. They're not a conservative or Democrat movement. They're a little bit more progressive. Sometimes you build coalitions with people who you do not agree 100% with to move the needle or move the ball in the direction that you need it to go. And then you have the conversation about the hard things later on. And if you're so close-minded that you cannot build a broad coalition with somebody on a single issue to move the needle or move the ball or to accomplish the goal or move the ball across the goal on that single issue, then you're never going to accomplish anything. I'm not talking about compromise. I'm not saying, well, you come help me with this and I'll help you with this thing I completely hate. No. You don't agree to compromise on something to help on something you hate. You find the thing that you both love and you work together on it. And then you come together afterwards in a tete-a-tete and you discuss the things you disagree on. And then at the end, hopefully, even if you disagree afterwards, you walk away friends. Because people who fight a fight together, a common fight, a common goal, and win, it's hard to be enemies. But if you refuse to work in that broad coalition with somebody because they have one place or even several places where they disagree with you, you're the problem. It's not them. And when you're willing to work in that broad coalition, it helps stifle and choke down authoritarianism. And that's what we need. We need to choke out authoritarianism a whole hell of a lot more often than we have been in this country, especially here in the state of Minnesota. So, my friends, if you haven't yet, go to the membership side, watch the membership perks video that I put up. It's a little cheeky, but watch that. Pick a membership level. I'm very grateful for the 16 of you that have already joined as members. You have no idea how much that means to me. It really makes makes me want to put out more content just for the members, and I'm going to be doing that. In fact, I'm going to have a members only video that's going to be going up tonight after this, and I just want to thank you guys. And for those of you that can't, I really appreciate you too. I just want you to know this because I know there's some of you that just can't. You're like me. You're not in a position financially where you can afford to do super chats. You're not in a position where you can afford to do membership, but you watch and you share. And that means as much to me as the membership does, because I don't do what I do for me. I was on with Mitch Berg yesterday on his show. He was filling in for Brad Carlson. And I was on with Mitch yesterday for the second hour of his show to talk about Defend the Guard. If you haven't got a chance, please go check that out. I'll be trying to put a link to the audio version of the podcast up over the next couple of days. And he kept saying, hey, plug your show. And I'm paraphrasing what Mitch said because Mitch doesn't say plug your stuff. But he said, tell us about your show. Tell us about your podcast. And I told him, Mitch, I'm not here for me. I'm here for the Defend the Guard thing. And then he like, so no, come on, tell us about it. So I did a little bit. But even this show, when I talk about me, I want you guys and what I've been through, I want you to understand it's not about me. I'm not doing this for me. And so, like, I want you to hear, I'm doing this for those of you that watch so that you know that there's a place where you can go to hear and meet other people who think like you, or maybe don't think just like you, so that you can hear and meet these people, so that we can all be challenged in our presuppositions, that we can find that broad coalition of people that we can work with to move the ball across the goal. And when you guys decide to help by sharing my content, liking the content, subscribing to the channel, or joining the memberships, when you guys decide to do that, that means the world to me. I don't know how to tell you that any more than I already have. It means the world to me that you guys would do that. So my friends and my fans, my supporters, my viewers, you're my friends, and then my hate watchers, and then my FBI and BCA monitors. I hope you learned something from watching this show, watching this channel, watching this conversation. We need a lot more people like Gary and a lot less people who think they're entitled to a position because they've always had it. And we need a lot more people willing to build coalitions to move a ball across the goal. My friends, my friend Monica made this for me last year. Fight for your liberty. It is yours. Fight for your freedom. It belongs to you. And until next time, love you guys. Thank you very much. And Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30. Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.